Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Environment Matters. The Environment Matters is a monthly production of the EPA, where we focus on environmental matters, environmental observances, and everything that is related to the environment. We've been missing for a bit, but we are back and we are ready to share with you. My name is LaDonna Kisoon, and joining me in studio today, I have Mr. 𝐶𝐳𝐸𝐺, the head of the Investigation and Enforcement Department at the agency, and Ms. Sharifa Parks. She is an attorney at law at the agency within our legal department. Today we're going to be having a conversation on the complaints management at the EPA. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
I trust you guys are having a good morning.
Yep.
All right, so before we dive into our conversation today, which is going to be focused on our complaints and enforcement, let's share with our listeners a little bit about what you do within your departments. Let's start with you, Sharifa.
Most definitely. I said before, my name is Sharifa Parks. I'm one of the legal officers at the Environment Protection Agency, and I'm currently in charge of the Compliance and Investigative Unit, where I offer legal advice and I also offer legal representation, as I am also one of the litigating officer.
All right, 𝐶𝐳𝐸𝐺.
All right. Thank you again for having me here. So as you said, I'm 𝐶𝐳𝐸𝐺. I currently head the Investigations and Enforcement Department at the EPA. I would say one of the most busiest department because we're the department that receives all the environmental complaints. We process them, we investigate, and then we take the necessary actions against alleged polluters or defaulters.
Great. So there you go. That's a heavy mouthful to chew on, but it's really important work, and we have two very competent officers with us that gets it done. All right, so the investigation and enforcement and the legal department, you guys work very closely. You're like best friends, right? You're
Yeah.
best friends in the
Yeah.
Yes.
So during the year 2024 into 2025, you guys have worked tirelessly. Like, if you've been following us on social media, you see a lot of the work that we've been doing, not just in the field, but also within the court system too, because we've been there. We've been there. So with the two of you working so closely together, the Investigation and Enforcement Department, with the responsibility of preventing pollution and remedying the contamination within the environment, tell us how the Investigation and Enforcement Department and the legal department really supports the work of the technical program areas within the agency when it comes to the complaints.
All right. So the Investigations and Enforcement Department is there to support all the departments of the agency. We at the department, we basically regulate or we investigate unregulated activities, right? So unregulated activity means activity without an environmental permit. However, there are cases where we also support the permitting aspects, and that support includes conducting investigations and also offering enforcement advice, whichever is needed.
Okay. All right, Sharifa, do you have anything to add?
Most definitely. Adding to what my colleague says, basically we're the lifeline
Yes.
to the agency when it comes to complaints. So in collaboration with the complaints unit, one of the things the legal department does is we support them with additional legal advice as it relates to the Environment Protection Agency Act and its supporting regulations. So we seek to, basically my department seeks to review the necessary steps to make sure it is in compliance with the Act, and therefore advise on any enforcement measures that may be necessary in accordance to the Act.
Okay, and with the acting in the, I wouldn't say necessarily acting, but being present in the field and having to go through the enforcement leg when dealing with complaints, I'm sure that we do have that partnership with sister agencies that we work with. How exactly do we fit within those relations when it comes to monitoring our medias like air and water?
So definitely, external agencies or our supporting agencies, I would say, they play a very big role in what we do. So there's only one environmental protection agency in the country, and we basically investigate all types of complaints related to the environment. So when we do our analysis at the agency, one of the things we recognize is majority of our complaints are domestic in nature, and we see the local authorities in the areas as a perfect ally for us. So we basically rely on the local authorities. These are the NDCs, the RDCs, town councils, and so on, to help us to investigate these matters. When it comes to noise nuisance, it's a very big thing across the country right now, and that's why we have the support of the Guyana Police Force to help us also in that regard, as well as it relates to water quality and other issues. We have the Guyana Geology and Mines Commissions, who also play a critical role in helping us to investigate complaints that are related to mining. So we have that support, I would say, with the other agencies, and we do wish to continue in that same regard.
Yeah, so with the support, particularly from those agencies, are those agencies also equipped, Ms. Sparks, to enforce with regards to their law or our law?
So that's a very good question. In looking at whether these agencies are equipped, we must know each agency operate under their own legislation. And in some of the legislation, they actually tackle the same offenses. May have similar offenses, how we deal with a particular developer. For example, we know the Mining Act also deals with how mercury would therefore be distributed into the environment, while the Environment Protection Agency Act under both the water quality regulation look at discharge. So we do have that cross in some sense, but it's based on our collaboration and the development of MOUs that allow us to collaborate, giving them free range to operate under their act and also for us to operate under our act. Because simply because an offense may be an offense under the Mining Act and the EPA Act, it doesn't exclude where the mining takes legal step. It doesn't exclude the agency from taking steps. So it's both a collaborative effort and looking into which enforcement mechanism get the job done, and that's based on what we want the outcome to be.
All right. So one of the things we've realized is that the general public is always hungry for information. They want to know. They're on our page looking for stuff that we're doing, engaging with us, tireless calls, visits in particular. So they're always looking for that information. And given the fact that we are a very transparent agency, the work that we do is for the public, to the public. One of the most frequently asked questions that we get is about our complaints management. So if we can, let's share with persons the step-by-step process when it comes to complaints management. So start with you, Search Ball.
Definitely. Persons, when they lodge environmental complaint, they would want to know what is the outcome, what happens next, right? So the agency or the department, by extension, we have systems in place where we provide that information readily. We would have seen gaps, and we are working to improve that, right? So what basically happens is when someone lodges an environmental complaint, it's recorded, right? And we do a thorough screening of that information. And we're also moving now to identify risk as well. So we're also screening to basically categorize risk. And when we do that, it's going to actually improve our response time. But as it is right now, a complaint comes in, we screen that information, the information is verified, and we do a site inspection or an investigation. And that is a very crucial step where we must do to collect the necessary information and evidence to basically make our recommendations. Right. Also, in that investigations, we do scientific testing and also interviews with surrounding residents, which is a key part of our reports. Right. Now, after that, we prepare our reports. It's finalized, reviewed, and then we send the letters, basically informing persons what has happened on investigation and what will be the next recommendations. All right, so we are working to improve that channel where we get that information to you as soon as possible, right? But for now, we use the post, right? But we are working to improve it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm very happy that you made mention with regards to timelines, and I know the public are their persons are so key on timelines.
Yeah.
They're always looking for a very quick and prompt response to everything. I called today. I want you to come now.
Yes.
All right. They want you to come now to get the investigation done, and then they want you to shut down the business now. But I know we're not an agency that works in such a manner. So let's first off discuss timelines with regards to complaints investigation, the management and the response to the complainants and the alleged polluter. And then let's look at it from that of a regulatory standpoint. When does the legal department get involved with regards to complaints? So let's talk a little bit about the timeline.
So definitely. So the timeline aspect, our act, right, basically mandates us to investigate pollution. We have that mandate to prevent and control pollution. Now, it goes so far that to say that if there's a serious risk or harm to the environment, we are to investigate. And that is one of the approach we are taking now, is that we are basically assessing these matters by risk. So the risk will basically tell us how soon we can go or how soon we can respond. So if we investigate a matter and we find that it's a low risk, right, there is a timeline there. It's about 7 days that we take to investigate. Now, they are medium to high risk matters that have a smaller or a less timeline. So within 2 to 3 days, we are mandated or we are supposed to go out and investigate those matters. So one of the things that we try to do is to collect as much information as possible from persons and also doing our pre-inspection, right? We collect information from GIS, we look at surrounding land uses. So all of that information helps us to determine the risk, and by doing that, it determines the timelines as well. And I know persons, when they call, there's the expectation that we must come right away, right? The other thing that we also work by is schedules. So the country is very extensive and we can't be all over at the same time. So that is why we also try to streamline it by schedules. So we look at, say, for a week, and we gather and we group our complaints, and then we probably spend the entire week on the East Coast, East Bank, where the bulk of complaints is. But we have this system in place now to respond in a timely manner. So we will be rolling out that.
Great. So I'm happy to hear that there's strategies aligned, not just with regards to screening the complaints to determine the level of environmental impact, right, with regards to responding. So just know we respond to complaints in a timely manner as it is in accordance to our standing operational procedures at the EPA. One of the things I think a lot of persons don't know is you don't just have to call to make a complaint. We do also have a system where you can make that complaint online. So you can visit the agency's website. There is a complaints form. You fill that form up, and then you can submit that form, and an officer will call you back to confirm all that information. And then there's also our social media platform, which people utilize when making complaints. There's also the complaints hotline number that you can call. All of this information can be found on our website and also on our social media platforms. So Sharifa, we were just also talking about how the legal team gets involved, opinions, advice, support with regards to the other program areas at the agency. Let's talk about that first, and then I want to talk about the exciting court cases.
Most definitely. It's always my favorite part to talk about court cases. But getting back to your question, at what stage the legal department therefore interferes in, or I don't want to say interfere, but we have that interaction. So basically, as my colleague would have stated, after all that information is compiled, where there's a particular enforcement recommendation that is made by the officer, that comes up to my department, where I'm able to review the file to see whether the evidence gathered in itself supports that recommendation, if we could therefore successfully undertake the recommendation, which is quite important when we're looking at the environment, because we say the environment is everybody's business and the environment matters. So we have that interaction. Once all that data is compiled, basically my department, we overview that report, and therefore we either concur with the recommendations made by the officer, or we may ask them to go back to do a reassessment of the evidence gathered, or we may give an alternative legal action. But we also have another important aspect, and that is where we wrap everything thing up when it comes to, for instances, one things the public doesn't know, if you could access those particular enforcement mechanism online even before we go to court, whether the agency would have prescribed an enforcement notice, a cessation notice, or even a prohibition notice. You could actually access that by coming to the agency in itself. We do want to streamline to make it online so persons could access it now. But that's also something the legal department overview, because it is a compliance recommendation with the act that once an enforcement notice is given to any particular developer or alleged polluter, it must be made public.
Yes. So we get a case, it comes to the legal department reviews, they're able to give their legal advice with regards to the matter. And this legal advice, we've worked, we've done our compliance schedule, we've been back and forth with you, trying to make sure that, you fall into compliance, but you're just not making the effort. And then we end up in court. And what's one of the things that I often say is that I don't feel, not just us, coming from us, it's coming from us.
Yes.
But we don't have a lot of conversations outside of the agency with regards to our success in court. So let's talk a little bit about our success in court.
Most definitely. So our success in court can take two forms, but that's basically winning the matter. But I really want to talk about the other form, where we're allowed to do supervision for compliance assistance, where the court also lends a ear to the agency, allowing the alleged polluter to comply with the recommendations. Because as stated before, we have several polluters who they will not move even when we're taking them to court, then they're actually now going to say, oh, we're willing to comply, we're willing to implement those recommendations. So a lot of times we have compliance under the supervision of the court, which is quite important. That shows how the judiciary lends an arm to the Environmental Protection Agency, and that's quite important in itself. I know we have several matters. We have about 2 matters which would have had the court supervision, which was really appreciated, and we came to an amicable solution, and we were able to have the alleged polluter come to full compliance with the recommendations of the agency. And we're currently in court, where the court is currently supervising another compliance, and I do have appearance coming up soon. And I can tell you, the developer, he's working with us, and he's quite expeditious. And going to the other arm, where we actually would win cases, it's important to know that the aim is not basically to win cases in itself, but it's to have compliance achieved. Because as our logo states, the environment is everyone's business.
Yeah.
And the environment is quite an important thing. So even though we win cases, we look at it as not a win for the EPA, but it's a win for the environment.
That's correct. I'm glad that you touched on the compliance aspect, the fact that that's one of the things that we focus a lot on, especially with regards to court. We all want to make sure that the environment in which we live is a healthy environment. Recently we find that healthy environments are also linked to healthy mindsets. So it plays a part with regards to your mental and your physical health. So we are working to ensure there's a healthy environment, and we hope that you are working along with us. But how do we get to the compliance assistance phase with developers? Because that's a really big thing, and I don't feel like a lot of persons really understand not just the fact that we're working at it, but why we're working towards it. So I'll start with you, Serge Paul, and then we'll hear from Sharifa.
Yes. So as part of our act, it basically says that we are supposed to guide operators so that they can take the necessary steps to remedy a pollution incident, I would say. Right? So that whole process there, we actually view it as compliance assistance. So what happens presently is that we investigate, and we basically identify breaches or offenses that were committed. And the first step is that we actually provide practical solutions so that you can mitigate those breaches. So in that process, right, we try to work with these operators, right? We try to have, discussions with them. We try to work in timelines with them so that, they can fix the problem before it escalates, right? So compliance assistance is very, very important, because we don't want a situation where we give you recommendations, and that's it. We forget about you. So the agency is taking that step where we work with operators, because at the end, we are trying to have everybody coexist in this environment. You can have your operation. Once all practical mitigation measures are in place, you can still operate, and they can still have residents around. So that whole process of, continuously checking in with the operators, visiting them, providing that guidance to them, is that whole part of compliance assistance.
And it's good to know that, sometimes when you're offering compliance assistance, you may visit an operation 10 times within 1 month, because that's just the nature of the job, and that's just the nature of that particular aspect of the job. So the compliance assistance requires constant being present on the ground, constant monitoring of what's happening within that space, especially with regards to if it's a air dust or a smoke nuisance complaint. You have to be there to monitor it. And it really ties in the agency's presence, because we're not just there at the alleged polluter, but we're also talking to residents, seeing how the steps that we would have recommended, how is it that, is it fixing some of the problems that they would have been faced with?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So, Sharifa, that's it.
Most definitely. In supporting my colleague's answer, one of the things is the Environment Protection Agency is not only an agency for enforcement, but the preamble of the Act stipulates the agency is to balance the environment with sustainable development, which is quite important. And looking at our functions in itself, which is not enforcement but monitoring also, and having that assistance and engagement through compliance assistance. Many of these facilities sometimes undertake an activity and do not understand the impact that activity has on the environment. So having that engagement where the agency is able to bring them up to the required standard is quite important, as we don't want to have the big stick approach in some instances, but we want to get you to where you need to be, because there are several alternative measures which could be implemented to achieve compliance. But if we don't tell them, who will? And a lot of persons do not know they're operating in contravention of the Act, and so we try to bring them therefore in compliance with the Act, offering that assistance so we can achieve compliance.
Great. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a quick break and we will be right back. My name is LaDonna Kisoon, and we have been chatting with the head of the Investigation and Enforcement Department and the Legal Department, Ms. Sharifa Parks, at the Environmental Protection Agency. We'll be right back.
Are you involved in a business or thinking about starting one? Do you know there may be environmental impacts from business activities? According to the Environmental Protection Act of 1996, businesses such as gas stations, rice mills, large-scale agriculture and poultry farms, large-scale mining and forestry operations, hotels, and resorts must be authorized. Persons proposing any of these activities need to submit an application for environmental authorization to the EPA. Attention all miners. Mining is important to Guyana's development, and so is our biodiversity. Practice smart mining. Use a retort, dispose of your waste properly, manage your tailings well, and reclaim mined out areas. Remember, improper mining is a threat to your health, biodiversity, and a hindrance to prosperity. A message from the Environmental Protection Agency and Ministry of Natural Resources with funding from JEF through the United Nations Development Program.
At the Environmental Protection Agency, we believe that the environment is everybody's business. We can start caring for our planet by becoming more environmentally friendly in our everyday actions. Here's what you can do. Dispose of waste in a garbage bin. Clean our drains, yards, and carpets regularly. Take a reusable shopping bag to the market. Support local butchers and farmers to reduce packaged waste. Plant a kitchen garden, trees and flowers. Compost your organic waste. Conserve water and electricity. Carry a reusable water bottle. These little acts are good for your health and that of the environment. Remember, healthy people work better and achieve more, and together, small actions make a big difference. For further information on how you can help, please contact the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Ganges Street, Sophia, or telephone us at 225-5467. You can also visit our website, epagana.org, or our Facebook and Instagram pages.
Welcome back to The Environment Matters. So my name is Ladonna Kisoon, and we have been chatting with Mr. 𝐬𝐶 Singh and Ms. Sharifa Parks from the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you for joining us back for this second half of our show. We've been talking about complaints management and investigation. We were just talking a little bit prior about how we offer the compliance assistance to the alleged polluters. I'm going to continue to say that. The alleged polluters. So the two departments itself, you work together to take legal action. And these legal actions are a requirement more so under our regulations. So how exactly do we tie in the regulatory aspect to that of what's happening in the environment? We find often that persons, when you're talking to them, they want you to tell them about the law. Mm-hmm. So I'm particular. If you're going to come to me and you're going to say something, I'm going to ask you, and what part of the law says that I need to do this, or I have to act in a certain way? So let's talk a little bit about our laws at EPA. Ms. Parks?
Most definitely. I always say that's my favorite part of the job. But the Environmental Protection Agency is governed by the Environmental Protection Agency Act, Chapter 2005, Laws of Guyana, and is also governed by its subsidiary regulations. And that's quite important, because one of the important things when we look at compliance in itself, it varies. For a prime example, Section 34 speaks about noise and also litter. However, we do have a noise management regulation and the litter regulation that gives us more of a narrow point of view. When I say narrow, I use the word quite loosely. It most provides standards on how therefore persons should operate. For example, when you're operating a sound making device, in accordance to regulation 4, there are permissible levels. And there's also the consideration of distance and how that particular equipment is secured in itself, and also that equipment should be soundproof in accordance to regulation 20. Now we're looking, for example, the litter regulations. We're looking at how persons dispose litter outside of a receptacle, and I stress that outside of a receptacle, which is quite important, or any authorized site. So we look at those persons, whether they're going to dispose in a public place or those in a private place or a premises, should I say. So the Act itself stipulates standards on how persons should therefore interact with the environment when it comes to both permitted facilities and unpermitted facilities. Because we must understand what the function of the agency does, which is under Section 4, and that which in exercising its functions, how we're to exercise those functions. So a lot of time people therefore come and they ask us, we need this to be shut down. But the Act stipulates a particular procedure. We just can't go in and shut down. The Act says where you have a complaint, you are to investigate that complaint. But it's even more important, persons, therefore, sometimes we come and they say, but nobody complains. But then we have to balance whether we're being proactive versus reactive in itself.
Yes.
And the agencies in itself, due to the Act, allow us to be both proactive and reactive. And persons must have that clear understanding.
Yeah.
So while you come and you say shut down, we're not always going to do that. The Act stipulates itself. So having an understanding of the Act. And the beauty about it, you don't have to be an attorney to therefore have an understanding of the Act. An attorney may have an in-depth understanding, but any person could read the Act and have an understanding of the Act. And look at that, the agency therefore has a statutory obligation how we execute and deal with complaints. And that's quite important.
Yes, definitely. Would you like to add anything to that, Search Bar? Okay. So Ms. Sparks would have definitely covered her legal grounds. Right. Okay. So if you're to recommend measures to be implemented when it comes to making sure that the conduct of complaints is effective, what would be some of those measures coming from you, Search Ball, that you think would satisfy the agency's intent? So I have an operation. One of the common things that we find is woodworking. So I have a woodworking facility. We call them bottom house, right? I have a bottom house woodworking facility. Nobody has made a complaint against me as yet. What would be some of the things that you would suggest to me to put in place before I get a complaint or we get to that complaint stage?
All right. So first things first, approvals are necessary, and persons are not aware that they need approval. So approval starts from your local authority, your NDCs. So you are to approach the NDC with a site plan and probably a proposal of what you intend to do. And that NDC is supposed to verify that information, check in with residents, right, to say, that this activity will be suitable for this location. And then they make a recommendation, right, or they give a no objection to that activity, and that information is channeled to the Central Housing and Planning Authority, who gives a final approval, I would say, or it's called a planning permission, outline planning permission, right? Now, persons who want to set up an activity within a residential areas, we're advising you, that is the first step that you must take. Visit your local NDC, right? See to get your approvals, right? Now, when you get your approvals, right, or sometimes the approvals may take a while, right? The agency, right, haven't recognized that, say, for example, what we're doing right now, we're looking at hotspot areas. And when we do our analysis, we find, take, for example, 𝐿𝐿𝐼𝐻 is a hotspot area, right? While we may have existing cases that were reported to the agency in 𝐿𝐿𝐼𝐻, it does not limit us to only visit those. When we're in that area, we do a comprehensive check of, of the activities. So we may come to you and we may see that you are starting to set up a woodworking operation or join a shop. So first when we come, we would ask if you have the necessary approvals and these things, and then we go on to give you that guidance, right, in the form of the compliance assistance. Now, the first step when we have operations like these is that, one, you will have song making devices on site. So your things like planer, saws, many other things, generators and so on, right? Now, for those type of equipment to exists within a residential area, you must have some sort of enclosure or some sort of some proofing measure to basically abate the noise or trap the noise to a sense. So one of the practical recommendation we would give for persons is to have an enclosure. And sometimes the biggest thing persons say is that, oh, the expense or the financial aid that goes into that, right? But at the same time, you also have to look at it is that you are operating within a residential area, right? You will be emitting pollutants, and there will be sensitive persons around, right, who will start to lodge complaints. So rather than reaching that stage where, you know, a complaint is being lodged against your operation, you put the necessary steps in place so that, you know, the entire issue can be mitigated. So by doing that, you will, right, operate in accordance with the regulations, because the pollution will be contained and will be prevented to an extent, right? But we also try to, you know, work with these persons. We try to offer as much advice as possible. And one of the good things also is that persons or operators, they have knowledge more than us. So sometimes it's a collective effort whereby we can easily resolve an issue.
Yeah. And when we say they know more than us, it's with regards to their operation. It's their
Quite
facility.
right.
So they know what the ins and outs are for their operation. And then we will definitely be there to guide you on. I want to also add one of the key things to also remember is outside of getting your NDC or your RDC's approval, it doesn't stop there. One of the things that I like to advise persons when they call and they say, oh, well, you know, if I want to set this up and I want to set that up, despite the scale, despite the magnitude, I often say to them, apply for environmental authorization. Apply for your authorization. When the screening process of that is over, then we give you the information on, do you require an environmental permit or not? So that gives you that safeguard. So if you require an environmental permit, then you follow steps. But if you do not, then that puts you at ease. And again, this is all in accordance to our act. So please keep that in mind. If you're going to have an operation or you want to have an operation, a business that is, please ensure that you seek all necessary approvals. It's like driving a car. You can't exactly go on the road without your insurance, without your fitness. So let's just remember, like Ms. Sparks continues to reiterate, that the environment is everybody's business, and we want to ensure that we all do our part for the environment. So while we're on the note of the investigation, giving advice and recommendations to persons, how exactly do we engage with the residents? You know, we find that now persons are very plain out. Oh, I made a complaint. Okay, ma'am. At the agency, we keep that information very private. Very, very private. We do not disclose who makes complaints at no point in time. So how do we engage with residents? Do we have a strategy? Is it a radius that we look at when we go out? Are there particular questions that we're asking residents with regards to that complaint? And when we do go out, do we go out in full force? Take Miss Parks with us? We go with so how? Share with us, how exactly do we engage with residents when it comes to the investigation aspect of complaints?
So the engagement with residents is a very critical component to our investigations, because it will actually help us to validate the complaint even further, right? So we have strategies that we employ, and it may not be the same for all cases, right? But we try to look at surrounding residents, and we try to, if we are in, say, an area, Lusignan, right? We just don't go at persons right next door or immediately. We try to go, the back street, the street in front. So we try to collect as much information as possible, because sometimes we look at these matters, right, and we find that it is only one person being affected by this situation, versus cases where an entire street might be affected, or a community as a whole, right, may be affected by this issue. And when things like that happen, that's when we ramp up our investigations, or we ramp up our actions against these operators. But we basically try to engage persons as much as possible, and what we basically want from them is confirmation that they are being affected, right? So there are certain key questions that we would ask, like, how are you being affected? What is the frequency of the operation? And other key informations that will help us to, basically concur that, yes, this activity has an impact on the residents.
Okay. So when we talk about the investigation aspect, I mean, we would have touched a little bit on it earlier, but I want us to dive into it. When we talk about the investigation aspect and being able to gather evidence, because having conversations with the residents is also a form of evidence gathering. But what are some of the other tools that the EPA is in a position to use when it comes to evidence gathering? We're talking about from that of physically being there, collecting data with our different types of equipment, or monitoring from where we are at the office there. So let's start with you, Search Ball. Let's talk a little bit about what we're equipped with, and then we can talk about how that adds to evidence.
Yeah, so definitely the evidence is another big part of your report, because as my colleague here would say that, if a report goes up and there's no evidence, right, to support that breach, then
she starts asking questions.
Yeah, and it's returned.
Yes.
So the information aspect is very, very important. And when we do our investigations, we look for all sorts of information, observations, key information that will help us to basically corroborate our findings. So one of the key evidence that we collect are pictures, right? Pictures are very important because they give you the exact happenings on the ground. Right? Now, apart from pictures, we have our scientific equipment that we gather information from. So one of the key is the song level meters, and we collect readings from those meters, which are then added to our report to back our findings. We also have equipment that we can test the VOCs, which are chemicals coming out from a spray painting workshop, also from furniture activities. We also have meters that assess the different size of dust particles, right? So we have scientific equipment in our possession that can help us to gather those evidence. You also reference we can be at the agency and also collect evidence, because the agency now is big on real-time monitoring. So we have set up pieces of equipment across the country that we generate real-time data. So we can be at the agency and there can be a pollution incident happening on the Essequibo River, and we can be notified of that. So, yeah.
And you, as the public, you also have access to some of that information. Again, you can visit our website and you'll be able to see the air quality within your region, because we have air quality sensors set up in and around Guyana, so that you'll be able to monitor the air that you are breathing at that time. So, like Search Bob mentioned, in Essequibo, we do have a AQI meter set up there, and you can visit the website to be able to see the air quality. We have one right here in Central Georgetown. We have along Quarantine Berbice in Region 10, Linden, and in and around Guyana. So you can visit the agency's website. We have a dashboard for water quality also, so you'll be able to see the water quality of both the Demerara and Essequibo River. So let's get back to you, Sharifa, with regards to the evidence gathering through all of this monitoring that we're doing.
So basically, we must have an understanding what is evidence. Evidence is basically to prove or disprove something. So when the agency goes out into the field, given the aspect, our main focus when we have a complaint, it's to therefore determine whether that complaint is valid or not. So basically, we're proving or we're currently disproving the validity of that complaint. So my colleague would have indicated how we therefore gather evidence, whether it's from observational evidence, we have photographic evidence, which is real or documentary evidence, and we also have the several equipment from the noise meter. So one of the important things, and the report is quite important, you must have the analyzation of that data, which is therefore expressed in the report, looking at what is baseline, being able to identify the actual pollutants contribution to the baseline or addition to the baseline. So that's quite important. So the agency doesn't have a one fit evidence or evidence that fit all. So we therefore utilize a range of evidence. We also look, as you, my colleague, been indicating, having those particular persons who make complaints. A lot of them are willing also to give oral evidence in some instances where we're able to document through interviews. So the agency extent of what evidence we collect range from real evidence to documentary evidence, given the fact we're to prove or disprove something, which is quite important to the agency, and the agency's ability to analyze the data it has before them to therefore make the most appropriate choice when it comes to both recommendations or an enforcement action to be undertaken.
All right. So as we wrap up our discussion, let's talk about what are your plans for 2025. I mean, we're in the height of the fourth month of the year, but we do have a long way to go. And at the agency, we continue to make big strides and steps with regards to making the process simpler, making the process more efficient and effective. So let's start with you, Serge Paul. I know your team, they work tirelessly. So again, thank you to the investigation and enforcement team at the EPA for the work that you do. It is impeccable what the efforts that you put in with regards to the work. So let's talk about what plans you have for 2025.
Yeah, and before I get to that, I must say that I must applaud my team indeed, because they are young professionals that are eager to get the work done. Their love for the environment propels them every day to continue doing the great work they have been doing. So kudos to them as well. But coming back to what are our plans for this year, as we're discussing all the time, the aspect of getting information to complainants as fast as possible, that is our key focus for this year. And by doing that, you will be seeing us a lot in communities. So we will have these engagements in community. They will be targeted and direct. So when we come, we address issues, we give you updates, and we also engage, other activities that we see may have the potential to impact the environment. We will be engaging those as well. But one of our key projections, I would say, is to engage communities and have that information, given to them in a timely manner. So look out for us. You will be seeing us in communities as we basically roll out the agency's work.
All right, Ms. Barnes?
Most definitely. As you stated before, it is therefore becoming more efficient. And my department, we would just like to support the complaints department in providing that service and to becoming more sufficient, and also providing any support when it comes to capacity building training, or also going out in the field to therefore lend our physical support, because it's not always about being in the office. By looking at the aim of the Environment Protection Agency, we're therefore geared to from getting to good to impeccable And that's our aim
Yes.
for the remaining of 2025.
All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Environment Matters. Do remember to stay connected with the EPA by picking up a copy of your Sunday Chronicle or Sunday Guyana Times newspaper to read our weekly columns. Tune in to your favorite television program where we highlight the matters that are related to the environment at the Environmental Protection Agency or in our beautiful country here in Guyana. Stay connected with us via our social media platforms. That's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Listen out for us on our local radio stations where we bring you everything environment. Do remember to continue to watch NCN as we continue our broadcast of The Environment Matters. Feel free to call the Environmental Protection Agency to make a complaint or just to share with us your insight with regards to the work that we do. I have been your host, LaDonna Kissoud. Until next time.
Gosh,
Morning, Miss Sonia.
morning, Miss Cheryl. I'm late for work.
I noticed the other day y'all had a big campaign with them police officers, so shutting down them people barbecue, wedding, dance. Man, how y'all expect these people to make money and survive?
Oh, Miss Cheryl, that is far from the truth. The EPA and the Guyana Police Force are actually working together to ensure that persons who conduct certain businesses and activities are authorized. We're trying to allow them to adhere to the noise regulations.
Well, this gotta be a new law. What law is this?
These laws were always in place. It's now that we're getting all these complaints at the agency, we are trying to enforce them. The Environmental Protection Act has been in place since 1996, and it states that persons and businesses must apply for environmental authorization before operating a sound-making device.
Well, girl, I never know this thing is part of the law.
So if you're keeping a barbecue or an open-air function, like a wedding or a concert, especially in your community, right, and you're playing a music system, you have to apply for a short-term noise permit. And for persons that operate in a business and you got generators and stuff, you have to apply for a long-term permit. And that is applicable to bars and hotspots and clubs also.
Well, now that you explain it, I understand it. It's unfair to the elderly, sick people, and even them little children.
That is correct. According to the World Health Organization, loud noise can cause stress, sleep deprivation, and hearing impairment. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that.
Oh, now I understand. Thank you for explaining it, Miss Sonia.
For more information, you can contact the EPA at 225-5471 or visit our office at Ganji Street, North Sophia, Georgetown.